Oh my gosh. Hi everyone. I always get so excited when my face pops up and I'm live. I'm like, "Oh, I'm so excited to be here again teaching another free class for you." And this one has a lot of good information in it. And so welcome, welcome. In a minute, I'm going to pull up just a few slides because this will be kind of a full-blown class today. And when I'm in the slides, I have difficulty seeing the chat. But please type questions along the way today. And you can even tell me right now, just as we get started, where you're from. I always love seeing people that I know and also new people. So feel free to type where you're from and, yeah, maybe even what you want to get out of today's class. The title for today is called Why Helping Isn't Helping, which I know is a very unsexy title. I was talking to my mentor this morning, Xavier Dagba. Many of you know him. He's absolutely incredible. And we were just laughing because, his specialty is shadow work. And I do that as well with my clients. And you could say that today's presentation is a little bit about shadow work. But, we were just laughing at things like this, like these titles today. Maybe it's not even the most sexy title. Maybe it's going to trigger some people. Maybe it's going to cause people not to come. I considered renaming it at the last minute, but it is what it is. And yeah, there's so much to be said. Oh, I'm so happy to see you, Jamie. Yay. So happy you're here. Okay, good. This is going to be a good one. So just to set the stage before I pull the slides up, and I don't love slides, but they actually work pretty well, to be honest with you, because they give you a lot of information that you can also see visually as I teach. And they also keep me organized and keep me sort of on track. Because otherwise I could talk forever and flow in a million directions. So today is really going to be about how so many of us here, in my world, we have the best hearts ever. We really do. And we love and we care about people. I attract a lot of like the classic empaths or people just with big, big hearts. And so what I've had to learn along the way, especially as a helper in my own way, is that sometimes when we think we're helping people, we actually are causing them to stay stuck. And you can see it's like even cringy for me to this day because I had to learn the hard way that what I thought was helping wasn't actually helping people. It unfortunately was keeping them stuck. And so I'm not going to just tell you what not to do today. I'm going to just tell you how people show up unconsciously, right? Unaware, totally unaware. People don't do this on purpose of how they might be causing other people to stay stuck and what we can do instead. So I always try to give you a really clear, concrete view of, okay, well, if this is not the best way, then what can we move towards? So welcome everyone. Oh, Jen's here. So happy to see you. Yay. Okay, good. So I just shared that when I pull up the slides in just a moment, which I'm going to do right now, I'm not able to see the chat. Sometimes I can flip back and forth, but for the most part, I do want you to share in the chat and ask questions, even as you hear me teach today, and then I'll come back at the end and I'll open the chat. So don't hesitate to do that. And so let's open our slides and get started. Okay. So let me just double to make sure. Perfect. Okay, we're good. All right. So why helping isn't helping. Again, this is not the most sexy title. And if you made it here, I'm just so grateful for you. I was realizing afterwards that this definitely might trigger some people, but hey, it is what it is. So today I really just want to share from my heart to yours that, everyone who comes my way is a good-hearted person who we have the best intentions, right? We really do. And we think that what we're doing with people by being really, really compassionate and loving and caring and supportive is helping people. And there are certain aspects, of course, the overall thing is really beautiful. And I'm not at all trying to take that away from you all. I just want to help you to upgrade so that you don't cause these unintentional effects, which is that we end up sometimes enabling people to stay stuck. We sometimes end up making people dependent on us. None of this is intentional, but I want to share with you today just some tweaks that we can make such that we actually are really helping people. And of course, also, like thinking about ourselves, it has negative consequences for ourselves. When I teach you all about the savior complex, the rescuer position, there's things that have very negative consequences on us, such as becoming resentful, getting burnt out, taking over responsibility in relationships, which is honestly exhausting. We can also get disappointed and then, of course, enable the other person. So, we're going to go through all of this in much more detail today. And so let's go forward here. So we're going to start with the savior complex. I know a lot of you have heard this before, but let's just talk about it and unpack this. And this is a great presentation today for people who are in the helping professions, but also even if you're not, it actually applies to you if you are someone who is compassionate, who's open-hearted, right? Who loves to help. So you don't have to be doing this work professionally in order to glean wisdom from it. And so hopefully I can paint that picture for you today. So the savior complex is a mindset where a person feels responsible for rescuing other people. They often believe they know what's best for other people or that they must solve other people's problems. Now, this can be a conscious kind of belief system that they're well aware of, or it can be a little bit more unconscious. And so these people, they feel compelled to help other people even when help is not requested. So that's kind of like the kicker here, is that we do have to watch. I guess unsolicited advice comes to mind immediately, right? Like, so is the person actually coming to us and seeking help or not? That's something that we have to sit with. And these types of people often take responsibility for outcomes that should belong to other people. So this is where like the classic over responsibility in our relationships comes in. The thing that's really wild that I did not realize until later, years into my career as a psychologist, is that oftentimes the underlying shadow stuff behind it for us, and I know this is where sometimes there's going to be these hard pills to swallow. So I apologize in advance, but yeah, so sometimes the underlying thing can be that we are actually seeking validation or we gain a sense of purpose or identity through helping. And so, in a crazy way, we actually are getting something from it, which I know is like, even to this day, I'm like, ee. And so this is hard. Like, it's really part of the reason why so many people who have this tendency, like, wouldn't show up to a presentation like this today with all due love and respect, because there's some things here that are pretty cringy for us to see. But I know that, if you're in my world, you're willing to sometimes see the tough stuff, because actually, with a healthy sense of sort of humbleness around it, of like, cool, like, let me just see, what might be under the surface here. It can allow you to make an adjustment that's actually much more loving for yourself and also other people. And so hopefully by the end of today, you'll really believe me when I say that. These types of people often struggle with boundaries and saying no. So I know that's quite a bit of people in my community. In fact, the majority, 95% of the people that I work with one-on-one, we always work on boundaries. It's something that is very common. And unfortunately, what happens is that what we're doing when we're rushing in and we're trying to rescue or save people is that we are unintentionally reducing other people's autonomy or agency. And by the way, as I read this one, parenting really comes to mind. And I have a really good podcast episode where I talk about how this whole dynamic shows up in parenting. And it's called codependency in parenting. And if you want that link, just reach out to me and I'll send it to you, because I think it's a couple years old at this point on the podcast. And I should talk more about parenting when I teach, because that was one that got a lot of really good feedback from those of you who are parents. But again, the concepts apply really to anybody, and it relates to what I'll teach you today. So the downsides, of course, to this, as we've already touched upon, is that unfortunately what it does is it creates dependency within the other person rather than empowerment. It's kind of like, I know I'm going to butcher that that phrase, but the whole thing around teaching a man to fish, right, rather than doing it for him. That's the takeaway today that we'll really dive into, which is that we want to truly end up helping people by giving them the skills to be able to do it themselves and to not become dependent on us. And unfortunately, it can also lead to burnout for us, in addition to feelings of resentment, overextension, overgiving. These are all things that are kind of tied in here. And we can also, unfortunately, end up overlooking the perspectives or the capabilities of those who we're trying to help. And so sometimes, I mean, this is where it gets into very like situational and like it depends on the person. But sometimes if we think that we know better than other people, we don't give them enough credit to actually be in touch with their intuition and their inner knowing of where maybe they want to go. Or maybe we are overlooking their path, which might actually be different from ours. So this is all stuff that we're going to dive into more. And so, unfortunately, too, what happens is that the lens here is moves away from collaborating with the other person to what ends up being a bit more controlling, which I know is really hard for people to hear because that is something that I did not identify with at all. As somebody who is a therapist and a helper, I never was intending to control people, but unfortunately, that can slip through when we work with people in a way such that we are um, telling them what to do and overriding their own inner knowing. So the savior complex, the healthier alternative, which this is what we want to focus on today of like, okay, I get it, right? I'm starting to understand, but like, what else am I supposed to do here? This is where I just want to pause for a moment and say, wow, like none of us are taught this stuff. So please don't if you see yourself in any of the description today, which I still currently see myself a little bit. So there's always ongoing work here, but like really we aren't taught this. So please have a lot of compassion for yourself and just be open and curious to learning a different way. So the healthier alternative here is to support people rather than rescue, to empower them rather than direct or control them, to really move into collaborating with them and hearing their perspective and their opinions about it rather than taking over, and to respect their boundaries, their choice, and their ownership of the outcome. So, not to be so over involved. Like, think of a parent here who just is so over involved with the outcome that they're sort of forcing a certain path, right? And then the child ends up becoming disempowered. So, in terms of like how to actually do this, we're going to start to make it even more concrete because I know sometimes you can look at these and be like, okay, that sounds great, but how do I do this, right? So, we're going to get deeper today. This is a really helpful question to ask you, though, to ask yourself, which is, am I helping someone succeed on their own terms, or am I trying to save them on my terms, right? And so that's a good thing to check in with yourself. Now we're going to move into really focusing on the rescuer position of the drama triangle. And so what we just covered with the savior complex is really something that's very similar to the rescuer. So we're just going to frame it in this different, a little bit of different language. But I do think it's so helpful to learn about the drama triangle, which is really, it's a codependent system that 99% of humanity right now is actually stuck in, to be honest with you. I know some of you have heard me speak about this before, but I really do believe that the positive side of it is that we're learning right now to step out of codependency and to move into interdependency as humans, right? As a collective right now. This is the opportunity here. And we're learning how to identify things like the drama triangle, or even just like code, or even just dysfunctional ways of relating, to be able to upgrade, right, as a society, to know that there is a far healthier way of relating. And so if you don't know the drama triangle, I'll just spend just a couple minutes. I know a lot of you are, but the victim position of the triangle is really somebody who maybe they are truly a victim, right? That's like one case of like they truly are a victim in life. They're down and out, they are perhaps they're weak, they're powerless in some way. Um, and it can also move into eventually victim mentality, which I talked about on the podcast episode, the last one, where victim mentality is unfortunately a negative side effect of someone who has truly been a victim in their life, where then that person is really just they haven't learned how to become empowered and pick themselves up, and they get trapped in this mindset that life is against me and nothing's ever going to go right and poor me. And so the mentality that starts to take over ends up really creating these self-fulfilling prophecies. So it can be very, very damaging. And this is something that I know pretty well. As I shared in that podcast episode, I was living in victim mentality for years, before my therapist actually helped me to come up and out. And so the rescuer position on the triangle is kind of what we just covered with the savior complex. So I'm not going to repeat it here. And then the persecutor is the person who's causing the harm or the damage. And they're, typically on the more aggressive side of things. They might fall on the narcissistic side of things, right? And so not too many people who come to me fall in this position. But the thing of it is that we all sort of have these, Lynn Forrest calls it like our starting gate positions, where we tend to, as humans, sort of flip flop even within the course of the day because we're humans, like through these things. Just think about like if you get into an argument, maybe with your partner, you can really go around the triangle over and over again. And tends to happen in conflicts for every human. But then there's sort of like more of your default mode, where you are, right? And so many, many people in my community are over here and sometimes over here as well. So let's get into the rescuer, okay? Because I want to really give you a lot of, number one, clarity about how we might be showing up this way, but then also moving into solutions. So rescuers, they truly want to help. So I have so much compassion for this, right? They spot the persecutor and the victim dynamic. They just want to help. They just want to come in and make it stop, And so unfortunately, the rescuer ends up coming in a way such that they reinforce the victim's powerlessness by trying to save them. And so just right here, just for a moment, just take a breath and know that this is a very nuanced conversation. And so this does not mean that we don't still help people. It doesn't mean that that is a quality that we carry that we should extinguish. In fact, what I want to leave you with today is understanding that there's a way to actually help people that's way better than this. So we'll keep it kind of on the positive here. So unfortunately, this enables the victim to stay stuck and powerless, believing that the solution is an outside person to do the work for them. So again, I'll just pause here and say that I had to kind of really learn this the hard way. Probably in my first couple years of showing up as a psychologist. Back then, this was 15 years ago. I started working as a psychologist in the high schools of LA, and I had just the best heart, but I also was very naive. And so I was the classic rescuer. I wanted to swoop in and save everybody from all of their pain. And I was the classic sponge of like just absorbing, pulling all of their pain and suffering. And I got burnt out really quickly, really quickly. And so a lot of us have to learn about boundaries on this path of how we can really love and care about people, but know that it's not actually good for us to absorb their pain even as much as we want to, because it hurts us to see them hurting. But there's so much here. This is a little bit of an advanced teaching, but energetically, when we pull that and we try to absorb it, it ends up hurting us. And then it robs them from the this is where it starts to get intense. I don't know how to describe it in a different way. It robs them of the material or the alchemical container that they need to actually create the transformation. So I'll just leave it there. But, as I said before, this frequently shows up in parenting as well as with people who are in helper professions, but any compassionate person with a good heart is at risk. So, a shadow of the rescuer that most people don't like to talk about is that they are typically trying to save everybody else, but sometimes they avoid their own problems. And so they're out there and they're rescuing and helping everyone else, but then maybe in their life, right, in their home, things might be going untended to. And if you think about it, it's a very easy trap to fall into, because if you're so prone to kind of going out there and rescuing, then necessarily, it's just sort of like an energy thing of like, you just don't have as much energy to tend to yourself and your relationships when you're out there fixing everybody. So this is something that did happen in my marriage, and it was something I had to own that I was doing, that was my side of the street that caused things to go downhill. Now, again, as I share the story about my marriage, I often say there's two sides of the street. Both of us brought things that weren't working, but I was so overly involved in my work, and all of my time and energy and my heart was spent there, that I actually was not showing up fully in my marriage. And so that's just one example. So, another shadow of the rescuer is that we tend to actually source our self worth. We get self worth from helping other people. Like, it makes us feel good. It makes us feel helpful. It makes us feel worthy, and then we end up requiring that validation or those hits. And when that stops, we often don't feel good about ourselves, and we need that exchange and that flow to continue in order to feel good. So our self-worth is then sourced from other people in this interaction versus sourced from within, right? From our state of being. And so this really ties into like quite high and significant spiritual breakthroughs that I take clients through, of realizing like, where is your self-worth really coming from? And it even gets we take it even higher when I work one-on-one with people of, do you have a relationship with a higher power? What is your relationship with source, right? Source with a capital S. So obviously the rescuer tries to be helpful, right? Like, this is why I have so much compassion, because like, we're not doing any of this intentionally. And we hope to alleviate the suffering, right, of the victim by either fixing them or the situation. So on the surface, it does look like helping, but unfortunately, it is codependency. And there typically is that control aspect in it that I shared about earlier. So we try to fix other people by asserting control disguised as help. And so all of this, I just want you to take a moment and know that no one's doing this on purpose. But when we get real with ourselves on the codependent stuff under, right, in the shadows, these are the hard pills to swallow. And unfortunately, too, there's a shadow part here that often does feel superior or higher up compared to other people. And so, unfortunately, rescuers, because we often over identify with the suffering of other people, if we have weak boundaries like I did in my first few years of practicing, we're just going to get completely overrun, right, by all of the suffering that isn't even ours to feel in the first place. And so it really backfires, because we're here to be of service, but then we get so burnt out and tired and weak ourselves that we're really not serving anybody. And so by fixing and saving other people, a rescuer believes that others will appreciate and value them for their good deeds. But sometimes when we're not shown gratitude by the people that we're trying to help, we can get bitter, we can get resentful, and sometimes even kind of nasty if we feel like that person isn't taking our advice, or they're not, you know, uh, doing the things that we think they should be. Sometimes we can actually flick into that persecutor role. So the rescuer loves being the hero, right? The problem solver, the caretaker. And we're going to get into taking the best of that, right? And moving into the higher expression of the rescuer. So before I go to the next slide, the amazing thing about the drama triangle is that all three of those positions are archetypes. And it's not about deleting the drama triangle or stepping off of it. It's actually about transmuting each of the positions into the higher expression of each. So that's really cool. When I found this work about how to actually do this, right? And to understand that the victim, persecutor, rescuer, those are the lower expressions of the archetypes. They're the shadow side. But we're, from an evolutionary perspective, we're actually meant to rise up into the higher expression. And when we do, it does represent like a huge, it represents that humanity is evolving. I'll just leave it at that. So during this presentation today, I'm not going to get into the full transmutation of the drama triangle, but that is something that we do in depth in Alchemy of the Heart. And so I'll share about that at the very end. But this is just one piece of the puzzle here. So the coach, this is where we start to really shift into like, okay, so how are we going to make these tweaks and adjustments so that we're really helping people? So the coach is the positive alternative to the rescuer. They see the creator essence in the quote unquote victims, right? The people that they support, they actually can see that spark within that person, even if it's really faint, to understand that everyone does have that spark inside of them, even if they seem down and out, right? It's a whole different lens through which to look at people, right? And so we see them as ultimately resourceful and resilient, and we believe in them in that way, even if they're not currently living that way. We believe that they have the capability to do that, and that's what we're going to help them develop. And so it becomes an empowerment dynamic rather than enabling the person to stay stuck, right? Because imagine the whole phrase earlier, right? Like teaching a man to fish rather than doing it for him. You're actually empowering people with the skills, right? With the qualities that they can then take and apply so that eventually they don't need you anymore, right? Which is really powerful. So unlike the rescuer who ends up reinforcing the powerlessness of a person in the victim role, a coach asks questions. They're curious. They want to hear the other person's perspective, right? They use deep listening to support other people in that empowerment process. And ultimately, they're guiding the other person to listen to their own truth, their own intuition, and connecting that person to their own inner compass. Now, I know this sounds really great. And those of us that work with people understand that this, there can be a lot to this. But even if you're just understanding these concepts for the first time today, just seeing if you can move towards empowering whoever you're helping can really start to change your whole perspective on this. So coaches can serve as a teacher who might be just a few steps ahead, but it's not that power over dynamic, which is another shadow of the whole rescuer victim thing, is that you can see, I'm just going to go back really quick here. You can see that the rescuer is actually above the victim, right, on the drama triangle, which ends up unintentionally being a power over dynamic, which we want to move away from, right? So coaches, when we support other people in this more empowering way, we strive to be non-attached to the outcomes of other people, and we remain supportive and encouraging, right? And so there's also more here. How to be the coach. It's a move away from codependent caretaking to empowered support. It's a shift from overgiving and taking over responsibility towards becoming more collaborative with the other person. That's a really good way to think about it. How can I collaborate with this person? The rescuer patterns from childhood are definitely at play here. And so we don't have time today to trace it back to, why did this even come to pass within me? Is that in childhood, like if you had a childhood where you were parentified, right? Or maybe you had to always be the helper, or maybe your parents were absent, so you had to grow up faster than you should have. Maybe you were the oldest and had a lot of younger siblings, for example. Lots of different reasons from our childhood and our earlier years that can shape us into this. And so we just take a moment to obviously have compassion for why this might have come to pass within us, but also understand that now as adults, we don't have to do these things anymore, right? They might have actually served us back then. They often are a survival skill, right, for kids that had that experience. But now as adults, they end up causing problems in our relationships. And so it's just about becoming awake and aware to where we're doing this and knowing that there's a different way. And so coaches, which by the way, I don't love the title of coach. I wish there was a different term, but it is what it is, right? It's just maybe because coach is overused these days. But this person really does have to learn how to source their value or their self-worth from within, just by way of being, versus sourcing it or linking it all the time to always having to show up and help or rescue. So oftentimes we need to really strengthen our self-love, our self-compassion, and to be able to not do the thing that some rescuers do, which is that we're out here saving everybody, but then we're abandoning ourselves and our own inner work. So it's a call to sort of come back here. And it is nervous system work on some level. Can we expand our capacity to actually be with other people's discomfort or struggle without always feeling that it's our responsibility to intervene? This is a big question. And obviously, this one is not black or white. But if you have the tendency to always, always, always rush in and fix people, this is just an invitation to start to really take a breath and consider if that's always, always, always our responsibility. And also, are we able to expand our capacity to be with others' discomfort without being that sponge who's trying to pull it and then go through the suffering for them, right? That doesn't work. Can we increase our presence to witness other people but not fix? This is very, very powerful, actually, especially like if you are a professional that's holding space for people. This can be really, really beautiful for the other person, right? And people often report that this feels so much more nourishing if someone can just be with us and witness us and hold space, but not rush in to actually try to fix or rescue or give advice. And again, sometimes people might come to you and directly ask for advice. That's a different story. And then also with the coach position, this higher expression, we also respect our boundaries and other people's boundaries. And so learning about healthy boundaries both ways is also a really important part of this too. So I just have a couple more slides and then we're going to start to wrap up. So let me just check that really quick. Salome is here. Oh, great. Oh, Jason, it's so good to see you too. Thank you so much. So again, I'm just checking the chat. If you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear in the chat as well as we move forward. And we'll wrap up in probably, 5-10 minutes max with the slides. And then I'll come back and I'll check in with all of you. So keep typing in the chat. Just a couple more slides here. I just want to sort of end it and start to wrap up by really saying why should we care so much, right? Let me just take a sip of water. So as I've been talking about, I really do believe that all of this matters because it's actually really, really helping people, right? Not what we think is helping, not what we were taught was helping, but actually really helping people, right? Because it's an empowerment perspective rather than creating that dependency, right? And so for me personally, like this landed so much years ago when I finally started to understand. And sometimes we have to go through the lived experience of like doing it one way, like I did, and being like, oh my God, I actually thought I was helping and I'm not actually helping people. And so it was really a lot to digest. But what I've come to understand is that this really does represent true love. And it's also more loving to ourselves as well, because the negative consequences for us when we remain stuck in this way of being is that it causes burnout, right? Constantly carrying other people's burdens. It's so exhausting on all the levels, right? It also causes resentment, as we touched upon before. But there can be this real feeling of being unappreciated when other people don't actually follow our advice, right? Or like improve in the way that we think they need to. It can be like bring up all of this resentment and poison and even anger, frustration, irritation. And like I said, then you can flick into the persecutor position on the triangle sometimes. So also for us, it does unfortunately create that the weakening of our boundaries, right? We have difficulty saying no. It can lead to overcommitment in relationships. So really learning about healthy boundaries for ourselves and then also respecting the other person's boundaries is really, really a huge to again spin it in a positive way. This is like the upgrade here is that it creates an awareness of like, oh wow, I guess I didn't really have great boundaries, but this is an invitation to develop healthier ones. And it can create stress and anxiety, feeling responsible for outcomes outside of your control, right? And so it can actually, people who tend to be rescuers or fixers, they just have a lot that they're trying to do and help, and it can create this unnecessary stress or drama in their life. And then, of course, as we touched upon, neglecting one's own needs, right? Like, what's going on with you over here, right? Are you taking care of yourself? Pretty classically, like in my field, burnout is so common, right? And unfortunately, those of us that serve professionally, like we have to take care of ourselves in order to show up and support other people, right? If our battery is on empty, we're not going to be helping anyone, right? And so that's the thing. I think most people get that, right? But it can be very hard. Identity dependence, so your self-worth or your whole identity becomes wrapped up into, being needed, right? Which can be kind of a trap. It can lead to disappointment in ourselves and frustration, as I spoke of before. Other people don't change as fast or in the way that we expect them to. And then, of course, relationship strain. The people that we're trying to help in this way, they might actually feel controlled, judged, or micromanaged. And ultimately, underneath it, they're getting this message that, you're not right the way you are. And so, therefore, I need to fix you and make you better. And so, even though these words aren't directly spoken, this can be the underlying message that they're getting. And we're going to talk in this next slide about how it negatively impacts them, which what I just said ties into this one of how it can negatively impact the people that we're trying to help, because it can actually reduce their self-confidence. They might start believing that they can't solve problems, right, without somebody's help. They might believe that they're powerless, right? These are all of the unspoken things that are going on in the exchange here. And let me just go back up here. This is why I like to wrap up in this way, because for people who care so much about other people, this is where it really lands when they realize they may actually be causing harm unintentionally. So, this is another hard pill to swallow. We spoke a lot about dependency already, so I'm not going to speak at length with this one, but the helper becomes a crutch rather than a support system, right? That the person cannot live without. Um, and then, of course, the loss of ownership, the other people are really being robbed of those opportunities to learn, grow, and build resilience. I mean, just think about this is just an example of parenting, but it's just a metaphor for the bigger thing. Like if I'm teaching my child how to ride a bike, And every time that I see them falling or wobbling, I rush in to like make sure that they don't fall. Like I'm really not teaching them to ride a bike, right? It's so bad because like, oh my gosh, even myself as a parent, I'm like, I can see all these places where I'm doing this. The other person ends up feeling disempowered, right? Being rescued can feel patronizing or dismissive. That's another part of it that often goes unsaid when people are talking about the rescuer dynamic, because it can actually feel patronizing to the other person. Okay, so weaker accountability, responsibility shifts away from the person who that is actually their problem to own, but then we rush in and we take it from them. So this touches into really being able to have a growth mentality and to understand that actually oftentimes problems, right, or challenges it's really life serving us up the material that we need to grow and evolve is how I often talk about it. And many of you here know that I speak about that. But bumps in the road, challenges, the classic rescuer wants to come in and save it, right? Save the person from having to go through it. But then we actually take those opportunities away from them to grow, right? And become stronger and more resilient. So reduce innovation and creativity. People are less likely to develop their own solutions. Like it's so interesting because, on the flip side, I'm not suggesting that we should do this, but kids who maybe didn't have a whole lot of support growing up, they had to like really think outside the box and get really creative, right? Because they didn't have someone to help them. So they were sort of forced to, um, be really self-sufficient, right? And so it doesn't have to be like one or the other necessarily, but we do want to actually encourage the other people to get creative rather than always telling them the answer. And then also the hidden resentment, right? Not only do we maybe as rescuers sometimes feel resentful, but the other person might also be resentful. They might feel controlled, pressured to be grateful, indebted to the other person. And so a savior mindset often reinforces being needed, while effective support makes us less needed over time. So I'll just spend a moment on this because this is especially for my fellow helpers, coaches, therapists, whatever you call yourself, right? Whatever type of support person out there. I just want to say that I did have to learn the hard way that therapists are very unfortunately doing this quite a bit. It's so cringy. I did make a video a long time ago about this. I don't know where it went, but unfortunately what happens is that therapists are always like, okay, see you next week, see you next week, see you next week, right? And they are actually in this system that is encouraging the other person to become dependent on them. I'm very anti this now, right? Like I want people, and I tell my clients, I want you to not need me anymore, right? That's my goal. I actually want you to not need me anymore. And it's not that I don't have some long-term clients, I do, but ultimately, I tend to work with people very concentrated, right, for maybe 3 months or 6 months. And then that person, I encourage them to like wean off and just check in with me as they need to, right? So we can ask ourselves, did my involvement increase this person's capability, or did it increase their dependence on me? That's a good one to check in on. And so the healthiest forms of helping usually leave people more capable, more confident, and more autonomous than before. Okay, we have one more slide, and then we're going to wrap up. So this was really just a little taster. This is everything that we're going to do in depth in Alchemy of the Heart. This program is starting on Monday, which is just in a few days. So I would love to have you. I'm going to put a link in the description, and this is for you if you want to develop more courage and power in your life. Because in addition to what we just went through, and this, by the way, is just scratching the surface on how to transmute the drama triangle and overcome it, because we're going to do way more. I mean, that's just one of the weeks of the 7 weeks, right? We start out actually learning how we can turn fear into courage and assertiveness, right? And being brave. So that's like the first thing that we do. We also talk about how we can reclaim healthy anger, right? Not toxic anger, but healthy anger to become more assertive, to develop stronger boundaries. And so that's a whole other week that we spend on really reclaiming healthy anger. So this is really for people that might not have great boundaries. Maybe you are on the more passive side of things. We're really going to learn how to reclaim healthy anger. Which seems insane. Sometimes I work with clients and I'm like, okay, I have to actually teach you how to be more angry. Sometimes people get so confused, but they understand eventually, right? Because healthy anger in its highest expression is just coming up because someone has crossed a boundary. So that's all that it is, right? We're also going to really learn about how to cultivate true self love by looking at the shame that we carry and by releasing it. So that's another really big thing we're going to work on. And of course, as we spoke about today, we're going to really dive deep into how to stop doing this, right? Rescuing other people, start empowering them. Overall, it's a program to really take maybe the tougher stuff of life and turn it into pure blessings, because we also cover things like sadness and grief and maybe the dark night of the soul, right? No, I don't wish that on anybody, but there are these hidden spiritual blessings. So we're going to talk about that. And overall, we're going to overcome victim mentality, right? And understand that life is actually for us. So I'm going to teach you everything that I know about all of this, right? So I'll put a link in the description. Would love to have you all there. It's really powerful. This is the third time I'm running a group through it. And so there's a few spots left. And so I'm going to flip over here. Oh, it's so good to see you. Thank you for coming again. I wonder if you could remind me of your name. I love your name here, Cosmic Fern Tree. And I'm so happy that you're back. I woke up late for the live. Look forward to watching from the start. Good. I hope you do. And if you have any questions when you watch the replay, this is for everybody. Just type them in the chat. You can also message me directly or in the comments, right? And I check all of those like every day. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'll stay on for just a few more minutes if you have any questions, any comments, right? I know I actually covered quite a bit today. Please let me know. I'm going to take a little bit of water. Did any of this make sense? Like, do you all have these? Can you relate to the rescuer? Can you relate to the savior complex? And where are you at right now, right? Like, have you already learned some of the things that I shared about how to move into more empowering dynamics? Like, I'm so curious. Yeah, you're so welcome, Jen. Jen just talked about, thanks for the reminder of the parent-child codependency podcast. Yeah, if I remember, I'll put a link in the description for people. That was a couple years ago on the podcast. Yeah, I'm just curious as we close out, was this helpful? Like, can you see yourself in the rescuer position or the savior position? And also for people who are in helper roles, whether it's professionally or maybe like you are a caretaker, to somebody, I would also love to hear as well. And if there's nothing more, we can start to wrap up. Okay, Jen said, I'm familiar with this dynamic. However, I do still like to be of help to people. Yeah, awesome. Me too. Some perhaps for the validation. I know. I'm so happy you shared this, because you know what's funny is that we don't have to shoot for perfection here. Like, it's really okay if we were like, oh my God, okay, there's probably a part of me that does that, right? We have to allow our humanity to be there, but also have something to strive for, of like, okay, like I'm going to allow myself to be human and I see it, but then I also understand this bigger thing of like, it might be better to move towards like an internal sourcing of self-worth, or to just know that like, even if I don't rush in to help someone, I don't always have to that's not my only source of self-worth. Oh, I'm so happy Angela's here. Okay, totally made sense. I found myself in a rescuer situation and I was so tired of holding someone else's stuff that wasn't mine. I know, wow, it really can be exhausting. And it's like this tricky trap that we get into because like where I've experienced it too, like if you start to go down that road with someone, it's you quickly kind of get ensnared in like the game, and then it can be hard to like pull back or exit from it, if that makes sense. Okay, Salome says, I can relate to the savior, rescuer, and the victim in different dynamics. Yeah, it's super common to move like really if humans move through all three positions typically. In my path, I started to realize that in order to be of true help, of aligned path, the less emotion and attachment I have, the more aligned the help is. That's a really beautiful point, actually. I love that because when we are really, that's like reminds me of like just being over involved. Right. And so for me, it's like most of you know, like I'm very much in the heart. Like I do this work because I really do want to help people. And so for me, it's been a balance of like, I'm going to make sure that I keep my heart, but then also that I don't get over involved with people. Okay, good. Oh, I'm so happy everyone came. I almost knocked my mic over. I get so excited to do these. And so tomorrow I'm going to be back actually with another free class. So please come if you're able to. If not, you can watch the replay. Tomorrow we are going to do a deep dive into healthy anger. So I hope that a lot of you can make it to that one. And I do want to share, I haven't really taught about the type C personality live, right? I did write about it, many of you know, on Substack when I wrote the article about the type C personality and my mom and how she really had it. She really, really had it. Let me just use this real quick. And so that's going the tomorrow's going to be a heartfelt one for me, but you know, beyond that, for all of us, we have to be able to learn how to work with healthy anger to make sure it doesn't get stuck in our body. Because unfortunately, anger in particular, all stuck, trapped emotions can cause illness and disease, but anger in particular actually can lead to really negative health outcomes. And so I really want um, and also to spin it in a positive way. The amazing thing is that once we actually tap into healthy anger, we use it to just channel it into healthy boundaries and assertiveness in life. And it benefits all of our relationships. And so it's actually, I want to keep the I want to keep the focus on the positive side as well. So, oh, so much love, everybody. So happy that you came. Thank you for sharing in the chat. And if there's any questions later on that come up, just reach out. So I'll see you all tomorrow. Okay. Bye. Talk to you soon.